the 26th of January in 2020, I landed at the Ora Tambo International Airport from Zurich in Switzerland. And I remember this day so vividly because throughout my journey, I had been staring at an Asian woman in the flight who had a surgical mask draped across her mouth and nose. And I remember thinking to myself, this virus must be so serious in China. Little did I know that this virus would be just as serious in South Africa. In fact, so serious that more than 20,000 people would have lost their lives by the end of November 2020, and that the word pandemic would form a large part of my vocabulary throughout the year. Obviously, weeks after that, I would be acquainted with the pandemic and also its devastating effects. At that time, fear and bravery coexisted. Fear, because I didn't know if I was going to make it out alive, but bravery because I couldn't wait to start visiting and reporting on my favorite community, the entrepreneurs and small and medium enterprises. I was certain that I would come across very interesting stories, but at times, doubt would creep in and ask, what if there are no businesses to report on? What if they're all closed? I stand before you today because, as you can imagine, fear lost out to optimism. Nothing was going to stop me from visiting them and reporting on their stories. You see, in the 36 weeks of lockdown in South Africa, I have also profiled 36 small businesses, small and medium enterprises that kept their doors open and also their inboxes to their social media accounts active during a pandemic. From Vuyo Dlamini, the founder of Timfoletinhle, she was stuck with rails of designer wear after customers cancelled their orders and traffic to their stores dramatically slowed. But she had to think creatively and out of the box to keep stock moving.
I've done a sale, major sale, where I'm offering 3 items for 1,000 rands. So this entire rail behind me, I think I counted about 120 items in the store that I could realistically add to this rail and recoup some of, the monies that I've invested in the material and the labor.
Here I witnessed agility and persistence. During this time, I witnessed the often spoken about beast within an entrepreneur. It reminded me about the first rule of starting a business. What problem is your business solving or addressing? I saw those that looked at the pandemic in the eye and said, bring it on, and those that froze at the sight of a pandemic. Despite the uncertainty of this period, new businesses were born, like the cleaner who collaborated with a fashion designer and a paint manufacturer, and together they repurposed their working space to produce masks, surgical masks, of about 40,000 per day. The implementation of lockdown levels meant that small businesses now needed to be supported financially. In fact, the South African government made available 500 million rands or $32.4 million in debt relief funds. Various departments like the Department of Tourism made available about 200 million rands or $13 million to businesses within that sector, but only 4,000 ended up getting that funding. These were in principle useful interventions, but unfortunately they failed to meet the immediate needs of small businesses at that time. For instance, some businesses did not meet the criteria needed in order to get the funding. Those that did had to compete for a limited pool in large numbers. And what most received at the end was an acknowledgement of their application as well as a reference number. According to the Department of Small Business and Development's own data, about 35,865 applications were received, but only 1,497 were approved for funding.
We've registered on the online platform, but we haven't received response from them. And this has been an ongoing problem, I think, with other entrepreneurs and SMEs as well. You go on Twitter, you find people talking about their frustrations in terms of receiving funding and all.
The cries from the small business community about red tape and waiting for weeks on end for a response on their application was heart-wrenching. This meant that their survival could no longer be guaranteed in the absence of financial assistance. According to the World Economic Outlook update released in June 2020, global growth is projected to fall by 4.9% in 2020. This dire projection reminds us of the role and the importance of small businesses in building economic growth. In South Africa, small businesses are responsible for the creation of about 60% of jobs. Even before the pandemic knocked on our doors, the South African economy was already languishing in low economic growth for well over a decade. And this pandemic made things worse. And even in these circumstances, it has been an opportune time for small businesses to start thinking of smart ways to keep their heads above water. Of the 36 businesses that I spend time with, all of them say they've embraced technology and some are looking to become more innovative.
The user now has got virtually a waiter that is there at the table at all times, which is by the form of their mobile device.
Just from how our guys are thinking, how we are thinking, and how we've remodeled our business model has become much better because we've spotted the gaps in the quiet times and we've been able to maximize on those.
Now, a question to small businesses. What has the pandemic taught you about your own business?
I had a reckoning where I realized that my business is actually a luxury. When it comes to with everything that's happened, people are now having to choose bread or beauty. So I had to realize that I need to be a need and no longer a want.
It is during this time that I started to think about the next pandemics and if businesses would be better prepared for these pandemics and what does that preparation look like. Preparation is anticipation of a customer's needs. It is keeping compliance paperwork ready at all times. It is giving service to customers so that they can prepare for the next pandemic. And preparation is getting acquainted with technology and how it can be applied to make business agile and resilient. However, the biggest lesson is that we have to learn to establish businesses that are first for purpose before they are for profit. There's no bigger evidence than the current pandemic that running after profit only is fickle. What is clear about this pandemic is that it has changed the world. It has changed the way we do business and it has also changed our social lives. The question, though, is what have small businesses learned during this pandemic and would they be able to recover in the next pandemic? How ready is your business for the next major disruption?